When we started our series on voting rights, we asked you to call us, email us, tweet us, send us a carrier pigeon, and ask us about what's been on your mind. And this week, we're going to go to someplace I've never been before, Inbox 0.
Hello. I just was wondering a question of how important it would be for us to hand deliver our mail-in ballot to the county clerk's office versus just dropping it in the mailbox. Thank you.
The most important thing is to make a voting plan that's going to work for you. And rules vary from state to state, so when you're making your plan on returning your ballot, make sure you look at when your ballot needs to be back to your local election official in your state. So get your ballot back as soon as possible and make your plan, whether that's to hand deliver it, to use a drop box. And if you decide to mail your ballot, make sure you know that deadline in your state and that you get it back in time.
مرحبا، السلام عليكم. أشكرك على هذه الرسالة. إذا كان أحد أفراد العائلة لا يتكلم اللغة الإنجليزية، هل يستطيع التصويت؟ شكرا.
مرحبا بكم، أنا اسمي الشريف ناصف، بشتغل مع مجتمع مدني اسمها All Voting is Local. بنحاول نساعد الحقوق الديمقراطية والحقوق الرأي. حتى لو ما بتكلمش اللغة الإنجليزية، أنت عندك حق تنتخب، وفي معلومات يساعدك في هذه الانتخابات. So language is power. When you see like ethnic tensions in different countries around the world, I mean, and in America too, obviously we have, like sort of like racial violence, like this has historically been a problem. And part of that, has to do with the lack of avenues to exercise democratic rights. And, language access is one of the ways to make sure that minority communities are included in the process. Ideally not in just a tokenized way, but actually like giving meaningful agency and representation to those minority communities. And doing so actually increases the likelihood of peace. So there is a peace building component to this as well.
If you are receiving an absentee ballot, can you change your mind and go vote in person? If so, what would the procedure be?
Thanks, Becky. The answer depends a lot on where you're living because every state's answer will be a little different. Since you live in Michigan, it's important that you bring your absentee ballot with you when you want to go and vote in person. That's the law in Michigan and California and Florida and a few other states. But if you requested a ballot and you don't have it and you change your mind and want to vote in person, you'll have to vote a provisional ballot. And those can be a little more complicated to count. What you ultimately want to aim to do in your voting plan is to vote a regular ballot and do this as soon as possible in a way that works best for you.
Hi at the polls. I'm Joseph from San Diego. My question is, there's a lot of talk about the presidential election, and we all know that's important. But I'm wondering, what are the other important things we should be looking out for on our ballots this November? Thanks so much.
Thanks, Joseph. There's a lot of very important races up and down the ballot this year, whether it's the House, the Senate, and local races across the country. Also, the ACLU is focused on a few key ballot measures that would increase equity and decrease injustice. In Oklahoma, another member of the ACLU family, Taylor Pendergrass, has been focused on State Question 805.
State Question 805 would begin to tackle Oklahoma's mass incarceration crisis. Oklahoma is the #1 incarcerator, not just in the United States, but in the entire world. And one reason for that is that Oklahoma sends people to prison for decades and sometimes life for nonviolent crimes like low-level drug possession or shoplifting.
State Question 805 would limit or end the use of sentence enhancements for nonviolent crimes. It would not allow judges or juries to consider past convictions during sentencing for nonviolent offenses.
Some of the folks that we have identified who are currently locked up include an Army veteran who was given 17 years in prison for stealing a $450 HP laptop. There's a mom who was at the time homeless and stole about $250 worth of necessities from Walmart. She was homeless with a kid at the time, and she got 22 years in prison for that offense. The win in Oklahoma would also be really significant because the sentencing structure that results in these obscenely long sentences for nonviolent crimes is a feature of a lot of other states. There are a rash of states that passed mandatory minimums and 3 strikes laws and enhanced sentencing in the 1990s, with funding and encouragement from the federal government. So showing that we can start to roll those back in Oklahoma, I think is going to create a lot of space and conversation about doing the same thing in other states.
Hi, my name is Jordan, and I'm calling from Albuquerque, New Mexico. My question is, what steps are being taken to make voting more accessible amongst Native populations in light of COVID-19?
Atza, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Atza Chavez runs an organization called New Mexico Native Vote.
Well, in a large part, the majority of our populations like to either early vote or vote on election day. So when you have a pandemic that dissuades people from doing that, or when you have those early voting days shrunk down to the lowest minimal amount, then you really disenfranchise a lot of our voters. So we have potentially, low estimates about 300,000 to as many as, 500,000 voters in the state of New Mexico.
Wow. And can you talk a little bit in particular about some of the obstacles to voting that folks who live in the tribal areas face when trying to cast a ballot?
Many of our tribal areas are in rural areas. So any of the challenges that you have for rural areas are compounded in tribal areas. A lot of our residents on the Navajo Nation in particular don't have a physical address or a P.O. box that is associated with them. So you have that particular challenge. During COVID, a lot of our communities, in fact, all of our communities, took the safe route to safeguard themselves and closed their communities off completely. So for some areas, that meant that there was slow or disruption to mail. They said that they went from 4 to 5 days to get something from a rural area to the urban space, and that was getting as long as 12 days to get mail.
Very excited for this new podcast. I'd like to know what voter protection, rights issues voters and poll workers should be looking out for at the polls. And who do you recommend reporting problems at the polls to on Election Day? Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, Laura, thanks for joining us.
Hi, stranger.
Laura, what do voters need to know?
No one has the right to take your right to vote from you, and so that we shouldn't let the forces out there that are trying to intimidate us win. There are potential different ways in which intimidation could happen, and I don't want to scare people into thinking like these things will happen. We're being very vigilant on our end. There's a whole team of lawyers also being vigilant, not only at the ACLU, but in the wider voting rights community to make sure that these intimidation tactics don't happen. So I would love for people not to go to bed thinking and to wake up and to go to their polling place assuming the best. If you do encounter something that either makes you feel uncomfortable or you're noticing that other people seem to be uncomfortable, I would say, definitely call 1-866-OUR-VOTE and describe in as much detail as you can what you're seeing.
I think that's the important lesson, right? That there's so many hypotheticals and everyone should know that people are preparing and there's help available.
We're preparing a lot. Believe me, there is an army of people preparing and thinking about these issues. And you get in touch with us and we are ready to jump into action.
That's our job. Your job is to vote. If you haven't already, go out there and do it. Info is available at aclu.org/voter. If you want to volunteer from your home to join our ballot measure efforts, join us at peoplepower.org. Election Day is soon, and we'll see you at the polls. We answered a few of your questions about voting, but there's a lot more to know. Be sure to check out these episodes of At the Polls about accessible voting or youth voter turnout. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.